I'm going to delay my typical introduction just to note that, of course, during that countdown music, I always encourage our speakers in classes to groove at their desks. And Dr. Crystal was by far the best dancer in the entire If-Then series so far. Huge margin. High bar to cross for the rest of the series. All right, my name is Jesse. Welcome in, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for loving science as much as we do on this exciting Wednesday as part of our epic 16-part series in conjunction with our friends at If-Then. If-Then is an amazing initiative of the Lida Health Philanthropies that celebrates and showcases the most amazing women in science on planet Earth. They have 125 ambassadors that they've made full-size statues for. They're not that big. They're bigger than that. Full-size is much taller. They've done all sorts of amazing initiatives to showcase the diversity of careers that you can have in STEM. I really encourage all our audience, check out ifthenSheCan.org. Check them out on social media. There's so much to explore and discover. So for this week, as part of our epic month where we always kick out all the dudes, we spend the entire month always celebrating women in STEM, usually about 60 broadcasts. We've been featuring some of their ambassadors. We've done everything from earlier today, biomedicine and health. We've done deep sea explorers, archaeologists, neuroscientists. It has been a while as an audience for joining us as we get to bring on the coolest people on planet Earth. And we are continuing that trend with our final broadcast of the day, the last of our triple header, in conjunction with Dr. Crystal Dilworth. So I could talk about accolades about her. I could talk about the really cool neuroscience of love topic we're going to do today. Talk about all those fun things. But I've got to say, personally, there's very few people that I've had more fun with in setting up a broadcast to begin with. And you're going to meet her in a minute with just an outrageous amount of color for Valentine's Day, and I think you'll agree instantly. So I'm so thrilled you're all joining us. I can't wait for all your questions. And without further ado, on a very interesting topic, Dr. Crystal Dilworth, welcome to the broadcast.
Hello. Hi.
We're here. We're together. We made it work. This is so exciting.
I'm thrilled to be here. I mean, look, I love science. I love brains. I love weird human behavior. Valentine's Day is about love and human behavior. So here I am.
Perfect. Here you are as the best possible guide to this topic with the most unique opening slide I've ever seen in 1,500 of these. So thank you very much for this. And I'll leave you to take us away.
I wish I could claim this was original art. I did get some assistance from the internet, so I don't own any of the images that you guys are going to be seeing, but I wanted to choose the ones that I thought would be sort of the most exciting, because we're talking about what makes us excited and what it means to feel things at all and what parts of our bodies are involved in those feelings. So before I jump in, I'll tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Crystal Dilworth. I have a PhD in neuroscience. So that means that I was in school after college. I did another 6 years of school where I was just studying very specific things that happen in our brains. And one of the things that I was studying is how, when we're exposed to outside stimulus like smoking or alcohol or love, the chemistry in our brains, the molecules in our brains change. And I was studying those changes. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's going on up there. And I'm super excited. So let's see, let's move on. Let's do it. Okay, so all of you have experienced emotions. I'm assuming that you're all human. And if you're human, then you have felt emotions. And hopefully we know what those emotions are: happy and sad and angry and surprised and scared and disgusted. But do you know why you feel emotions? It's just kind of like we just do, right? It's just obvious reaction to things that happen in our environments. But what are emotions? What purpose do they serve? Were they actually information that we're getting from our bodies about what's going on in our environment? So not only when our friends maybe don't invite us to their birthday party, we feel really hurt. But why do we feel that emotion? That is information saying, hey, that person is not acting like your friend. That person is not including you in the group. And being included in the group and having friends is a really important part of human experience and human survival. So that emotion is giving us information that we might want to pay attention because something's up. And that's the same thing as happy. Happy tells us this is great when we see our best friend for the first time, after being apart for a while. then we feel really happy and we run to them and we want to be with them all the time because they make us feel really good. And that emotion, that happiness is telling us, hey, this is really good for us. We want more of this. We should spend more time with that person. So knowing this information, understanding how we feel is incredibly important, but we don't always have to react to the way that we feel. So sometimes when we're very angry or we're very jealous, we might feel like we want to hurt somebody else because that is how we're going to respond to our emotions. But just because we feel those impulses doesn't mean we actually have to choose to do it. So what possible reactions could we have to emotions? Well, some of the most, okay, so the big science word, I was going to say the most evolutionarily conserved, but obviously that is meaningless. So the behaviors that keep us alive and really drive a lot of what we think of as just like human interaction is actually pretty simple. We either want to fight something or move towards it. We either want to run away from it and flee and freeze or hide, or we freeze. So I was actually kind of nervous talking to you guys today. So I was a little scared. So the emotion was kind of fear because I was afraid, oh, what if I don't explain the things that I want to explain well enough and you guys don't understand why I think this stuff is so cool? What if you don't like me? I had a lot of stuff that I was scared about. So I had sort of like 3 options if I wanted to respond to that fear. I could come on and be really aggressive and combative and fight and be like, you're going to like brains and you're going to like emotions and you're going to like me or else. That was an option. Or I could run away and I could have been like, oh, Jesse, I'm sick. I don't think I can talk to the kids. I'm got to stay home. And then I could stay home under the covers and hide from you. That was an option. Jesse?
It was. I'm glad you didn't do that, though. We really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, but sometimes, you feel sick and you run away. Or I could have frozen. And when Jesse said, okay, here's Dr. Crystal Dilworth, I could have shut up like this and have nothing happen.
That's an option.
I chose not to respond to that fear. And so I am choosing to be here and I'm choosing to just tell you why I love cool stuff about human behavior and brains. And so hopefully you will agree with me that humans are weird and cool. So when we do those things, when we fight, when we run away, or when we freeze, our bodies are experiencing a lot of things. And the combination of those things that our bodies are feeling, we usually interpret as our emotion. So we could tear up and start crying. We might start shaking. Our heart rate could really increase. Or, we could start breathing really fast. We could get sweaty palms. There's all kinds of different ways that our bodies respond, both to happiness and to sadness and to fear and to anger. And it's all prepping us for one of those actions to either fight or flee or freeze and do that really well, because those are the 3 things that usually keep us alive. Well, in the old days, we used to think that all of those emotions were really coming from our heart. So that's why when we talk about things about following your heart and doing what you love, we're talking about things from a heart perspective, from a body perspective, because that's how we experience these types of emotions, is in our body. And there's a lot of conversation that has happened about how do hearts initiate emotion? Why are hearts part of love? And did the ancient humans get it wrong? They didn't. Hearts are involved in the way that we feel our emotions almost as much as the way our brains are involved in feeling our emotions. So both your brain and your heart work together and they create this amazing thing that is called emotion, which is a contributor to basically the entire human experience. So in that working together, your heart is giving you information. Maybe it's slowing down because you're relaxing, you're feeling happy, or maybe it's speeding up because you're excited and happy. And in the background, your brain is working, talking to different parts of itself using chemicals. And so I love this cartoon here on the right hand side, because the heart is enjoying the experience of being in love, and the brain is in the background doing a lot of chemistry, really trying hard to make sure that it can create that experience for the rest of the body. Although you can't see the rest of the body, it's only heart, but hopefully you get it. So one of the cool things about brains is that brains are actually a collection of billions of cells. So it's lots of tiny little cells, and they all make up this wrinkly, weird thing that we carry around in our heads. And each of those cells has a specific type of function and activity. And if you, kind of like people, if you pair people that are good at the same thing, then you can get teams of people that can do something. And those teams in the brain are really like different regions. They kind of like all live in different parts of your brain, and they work together to do their shared action. So when we're talking about neurons, usually if you are in a science class, you're going to see something that looks like this. There's like a big part and a long part and a weird looking alien thing, and that's a neuron. But what does that mean? This is a picture of a cell, a cartoon picture of a cell. Well, let's see how two neurons connect to each other. When two neurons are connecting to each other, they have an interaction, and that interaction is where all of the cool chemistry happens. So they're not actually connected to each other. So they're not touching. They can't feel the communication. So how do they talk to each other? There's a gap between those two cells. Well, the way that they talk to each other is through individual chemical languages. So like if I wanted to talk to Jesse, I have to figure out what language Jesse speaks. Does he speak dopamine? Does he speak serotonin? What language do you speak, Jesse?
English only, and that's really bad as a Canadian. They tried to teach me French for a long time, but I messed it up.
So let's say if English was a type of molecule, then I would put a bunch of English words in a package, like a letter, and I would send it over to Jesse, and he would catch it, and he would get that information, and he would know what I was trying to tell him. That's exactly how neurons communicate with each other, by throwing chemicals at each other in the right languages. And each language kind of contributes to how we feel and how we experience ourselves. Now, I just want to show you that neurons don't actually look like this. This is what they actually look like. They're a lot more complicated. Every little dot in there is a different neuron cell body. So there's a lot of cells in that one picture. And sometimes you can take pictures of them glowing in the dark like this. And this is a picture that I took. So these are real brain cells from mice, and I have pumped them full of a fluorescent dye so that I could shoot a laser at it and take a picture and see what they look like, so I could show it to you. I mean, I just think they're so cool. So as I mentioned, different neurons live in different parts of the brain. And so I'm just going to tell you about a few of my favorite parts of the brain that are involved in love and in pair bonding, which is like what you feel when you're bonding with your friend, or what your parents feel when they found each other. So the nucleus accumbens, you don't need to know this. It's a very, very tiny, tiny, tiny part in the very, very middle of your brain. But it does the coolest thing. The language that the cells in that region speak is called dopamine. Dopamine is a particular chemical. That's all you need to know. And eventually, when you take high school and college chemistry, you will learn that chemistry can be described and drawn as like weird shapes and tiny different chemical functions. So just take my word for it that this picture is a picture of a dopamine molecule, which you don't need to know now, but you will later. Everybody has probably like heard somebody say the word dopamine. Dopamine is like the media star because dopamine is the molecule that our brain uses to tell us, yes, we like this and we want more. So anytime we really like something, whether it's a cartoon character or it's a movie or sugar, I mean, for me, I like chocolate chip cookies. So like chocolate chip cookies and me, that's a lot of dopamine when I'm eating a chocolate chip cookie. It's the molecule that is released that tells us we want to do something more of what we're doing. So it's the motivation molecule. Like we used to think that dopamine was only released by our brain when we did something that was like positive or good. And so it was like a reward, like a gold star for doing the right thing. But now we know that dopamine is actually the reason that we want to do those things. That's good. So without dopamine, we wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. We wouldn't want to go to school and see our friends. Dopamine is really important for motivating us to do things that are good for us. Dopamine tells us what we like. It's the reason that I like green better than I like blue. Green just gives me more dopamine. It's when we feel joy or delight or surprise. So anything that is new or different or shiny or bright or attractive or colorful, where your attention goes, hey, what's that? That's your brain saying dopamine. It's the reason that we can feel happy and we have fun. And we also see a lot of dopamine being released in our brain when we win. So when we're successful, whether it's ourselves personally, exactly, or it's a team effort and we accomplish our goals, the brain tells us this is a good thing. You want to keep accomplishing your goals, and it rewards us by giving us a bunch of this molecule, which makes us feel really happy and really great. So that's how dopamine influences our positive emotions. Now, there's other things that happen when we fall in love, and other regions of the brain that are activated and other groups of cells that are working. So one of those groups of cells is called the amygdala. And I know it's a weird name. Just when I say amygdala, just imagine like a tiny little group of cells that kind of looks like an almond that's like in the middle of your brain. Because that's what it looks like. The amygdala is the collection of cells that takes in information about emotions and decides what to do with it. So it helps you to process and understand your emotions. So if you are feeling hot and sweaty and your heart is beating really fast, how do you know if you're scared, if you're excited, or if you're worried? The amygdala helps you to know those things. So this is kind of the place in your brain that processes all of your emotions and helps to send that information to the right other groups of the brain that are going to help you respond to how you're feeling. So amygdala is super important. My other favorite molecule is serotonin. So the language of serotonin is everything is going to be okay. If parts of the brain are communicating with each other by sending serotonin signals, our mood is improved and stabilized. It has to do with like our appetite, like we're feeling hungry and interested in engaging in the world. It's involved in sleep. So basically like anything that makes us not grumpy, like taking a nap or eating something or helping out a friend, all of those things are serotonin related. So focusing and remembering and feeling relaxed, this is all having to do with the parts of your brain that are involved in dopamine activity. So that's how I kind of think about serotonin. I think of it as like things that make us not grumpy. But when we're in love, and love is super complex, right? It's not just, it's not just being happy, but being with the other person makes us happy, or we feel happy when we're with them. it's not just feeling like everything is going to be okay and nothing bad could possibly happen. It's more than that, right? It's wanting to take care of and be close to the other person or the other thing that you're in love with. And the molecule that's responsible for those feelings of closeness and trust and compatibility is a big one. Obviously, it's like love is really complicated for humans, and the molecule that's involved in love is complicated too. And so, this huge complicated molecule is released by the part of the brain called your pituitary gland, which is kind of like this really weird looking gland in the middle of your brain, but it's very important. And look at how different this molecule looks compared to the others. I mean, that's crazy. That's, first of all, it's huge. Secondly, it's really complicated. There's a lot going on. And I kind of like the fact that this molecule, oxytocin, that is responsible for those feelings of trust and caring and closeness that we associate with love, is pretty much as complicated as love itself. So, what does oxytocin do? Well, oxytocin makes us feel close to others. It is what's released when you have a really good hug, when you feel safe. Those moments, like maybe you're at a sleepover with your best friend and it's late at night and your parents don't know that you're still awake, or your adults don't know that you're still awake. And then you tell them that secret that you didn't think you would ever tell anyone, but you want to share it with your best friend because you just feel so close to them, and you know that sharing that secret with them is going to make them even closer, like make you even closer. That feeling comes from oxytocin being released in you, and you feel safe and you feel trusting, and you want to do things that will make you bond and take you closer to the people around you. So parents feel a lot of oxytocin when they look at their kids. So, that's usually why they want to take care of them, and make sure that they are fed and they have all of the things that they need that will bring them the other happy molecules like dopamine and serotonin. And if you're wondering, why are there some really funky looking mice on this slide? Let me explain. These are not mice. They are called prairie voles. And prairie voles, besides being absolutely adorable, are animals that, like humans, they do really long-term pair bonding. So they're monogamous. They find their partner that they want to be with for many, many, many years, and they share their lives together. And they release so much oxytocin in their brains that we're able to study, and we know because, hey, these animals are really, really close. They bond really, really tightly, and they bond for really, really long. Why do they do that? So we studied their brain and we discovered this molecule oxytocin, and then we found out that humans make the molecule too. And now we know that when our brains release a lot of oxytocin, that's the chemical that's responsible for making us feel that closeness, that bonding, that caring, and that love. And also they're really cute, so I wanted to show them to you. So is it oxytocin? Is it love? It's kind of all of those things. But we can't, I want to say that we can't be in love without oxytocin. I think I can say that. We can't be in love without oxytocin. But we can't have oxytocin on its own. It has other jobs in the body. But when you have a combination of dopamine, which is like the super excitement, like when you get a crush on someone, or when there's something that you really, really like, and you just want to have it, all of it, all the time, like too much is never enough. You just want that all the time. That's your dopamine. It's like you're motivated, you're going towards it, it's making you really happy. So dopamine. You also need serotonin. You need to feel comfortable with that thing or that person. The person you have a crush on, you feel comfortable with them. every time you're around them, your mood is elevated. You don't feel grumpy. Everything feels like it's going to be okay. And there's nothing that no problem that can't be overcome. So you need serotonin too. And then oxytocin comes in for that long-term closeness, that bonding, that intimacy, sharing secrets, and really trying to see and understand and know the other person. And so it's really a combination of all of your brain kind of talking to you in all of these different languages, with dopamine, which is more short term and really, really, tight spikes of joy and laughter and excitement. And serotonin, which is like more of a medium term, like comfort and compatibility. And then oxytocin, which is really that long-term bonding, that ability to really struggle through with someone and stay close to them and stay helping them and be by their side and want to take care of them and want for them to take care of you. And so when you have release of all of those different molecules in your brain at the same time in certain patterns, we can call it love. And so Valentine's Day and the way that we celebrate love with the heart is really actually accurate, because your brain's releasing all of those molecules and it's making your body and your heart respond in certain ways. And so I wanted in the Q&A to have a discussion about when you're releasing those molecules and when your brain is floating around and like really enjoying all of those chemicals. What do we do and how do we act to show people that we're feeling that way or that we love them? And so I'll just open it up to a discussion now. And let's talk about brains and feelings and weird human behavior and stuff. All my favorite stuff.
Well, let's. And first of all, before we dive into any Q&A, let's give you a huge thank you for that remarkable presentation. That was a ton of fun and beyond. I'm still inundated with all those things you threw at me midway through the broadcast that I had to shove to the side over here somewhere. Classes, YouTube, if you want to chime in with any of this, we'd love to hear from you there. I know some of our live classes have to go. It's the end of the day. Time flies and you're having fun. But we've got some questions on YouTube as well, or via email as well. So we're going to do a nice long Q&A together. It's Valentine's Day. So my answer, by the way, Crystal, is I have this great card for my wife when she comes home today. Got a nice gift. It's a book. Don't tell her. Shh, very secret. I know. We're making a fantastic dinner and dessert, German chocolate cake. So all those things, little acts of things, I know, with pecan coconut frosting. It's going to be a very fun.
Lucky lady.
I know. Yeah. We're both lucky. I love her so much. It's great. If any of our classes want to chime in, I love things too. Please do. But I want to start with a question that we got online, which is just amazing. How do we know what's going on inside a brain? You're talking about the amygdala. You're talking about the hippocampus. Like, how can we possibly understand that that is leading to such and such an emotion or feeling? Anything you can share on that?
Yeah. Well, one of the easiest ways to know that brain region is responsible for certain types of emotions is to look at situations where either the person or the animal doesn't have function of that part of the brain. So one of the ways that we learned that the amygdala was involved in emotional processing, emotional regulation, and that the prefrontal cortex, which is like the very, very tip front of your brain, helps you to make decisions about how you want to react to your emotions, is a long time ago, they were building a railroad. There was an accident and somebody had a railway spike. They survived. Don't worry, nothing happened. But the railway spike accidentally went through their head. Can you imagine? And then they were still alive and they were still functioning. We thought fine. And they were still walking and talking and being normal. But after the wound healed, they discovered really weird kind of behavior. So this man, Phineas Gage, that had the accident, yep, exactly, that had the accident, he was a really even-tempered, really nice man before the accident. But afterwards, he didn't have the ability to regulate his behavior or his emotions as well. He couldn't choose his behavior anymore. He became angry and argumentative, and he started fights. And people were like, what is going on? And that started their investigation around, well, if you lose certain parts of your brain, then that means that you're not capable of certain behaviors or you're not capable of certain functions. And so they were able to correlate the behavior to the loss of certain brain regions. And that's how they started putting the puzzle together. So it was really process of elimination.
I'm so glad you worked Phineas Gage into this presentation. I can barely tell you, it's one of my favorite science stories when I was a kid. That is amazing. And I want to go back to your earlier question. So our class on YouTube, we buy them things. We buy them snacks from the dollar store. Like, that's how we show love. That's how we show we enjoy things. I should have thought of the dollar store. My stuff that I got was much more expensive than that. If I thought that through in advance, that would have been perfect.
But Jesse, why do we buy what we buy? Why do we choose to buy those things? Why did you choose the things that you chose for your wife?
I chose them because I thought that those are the sorts of things that she would enjoy most. So with a card, of all the thousands of options there are for cards now, there was one that was sort of related to a theme in our relationship. And I thought, okay, that's going to be something that's really going to appeal to her. The book, same deal. I was in a bookstore. I was actually looking for another book, but then I saw something that was actually a second book in a series that I didn't know existed, which is actually something she gave to me when we first got together. We were like 17, which was like 14 years ago. We met in high school. It was very exciting. So that is why there's a personal meaning in that relationship.
Yeah, but the personal meaning when she gets the gift and she says, wow, Jesse knows me really well. And he wanted me to feel joy and feel like everything is okay and to trust him. You're choosing those gifts because you're trying to elicit dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin in that person's brain.
I'll let you know. I'll tell you later how she feels about the gifts, and we'll see if we did that. I'll actually ask her. I'll give it to her, and I'll be like, so, of the three, which do you feel you felt? That's like, this has been fascinating. Honestly, like, I have the pleasure in this job of getting to hang out with some really cool people, but I've learned a lot today. I'm going to be sharing this all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, you can choose gifts that make them go, oh my God, it's amazing, and like run around screaming. You can choose gifts that make them just sort of like tear up and feel very seen and very loved and very cared for and appreciated. You know, or you can choose gifts of things that you know are just going to make them feel good and feel happy and feel appreciated and like everything is okay.
All good options.
Mm-hmm.
Try and do good. If you can do any of those three, you've succeeded on Valentine's Day or birthdays or Christmas or any other gift-giving occasion. So I'm glad we covered all that. Yeah. I want a gift of knowledge from one of our questions we got via email, which is you talked about these prairie voles, which were delightful and beautiful. And I'm curious if there are other animals that we study their brains, and if so, which ones?
Oh my gosh, there are so many animals whose brains we study for so many different reasons. When we're thinking about studying animals and we want to make correlations to human behavior, so we want to kind of know if this animal's brain works like this, then our brains probably work like this. We choose a mammal because we're mammals, but we usually choose a less complicated species to work with. So the closest brain to ours would be like a gorilla or an orangutan, but like doing experiments with humans is really complicated because humans are really complicated, and primates like gorillas, like monkeys, like orangutans are also really complicated to work with, and they have similar feelings and thoughts and emotions to us. So we don't think it's really ethical to do a lot of experiments on them because they would be affected by it similarly to the way that a human would be affected. So we choose mice, we choose prairie voles. Sometimes we need the brain to be a little bit bigger because the region that we're looking at is really small. So we'll choose a rat. Some of the pioneering experiments that were done on vision. We understand how eyes work. Were done on cats. Which, like I have a cat. I don't think I would let my cat be experimented on, but hey, and then when we're looking at other behaviors, like when we want to look at simple responses like fight, like flight, or freeze, then we can look at less complicated animals. So sometimes that's something as silly as a zebrafish or a worm. and sometimes it's a little bit more complex than that, like a fruit fly. But there's lots of reasons why you would choose a certain type of animal to help you answer the question that you're asking.
Yep. We've done a lot of talks in our past with biologists where the worm and the fruit fly get brought up because they're the model for a lot of things in science. If you end up in biology students, you can't avoid fruit flies and worms. They're everywhere. They're all over the place.
When I was in graduate school, the lab that I did my research in was next to a lab that was using fruit flies as their fly model. And every once in a while, experimental flies would get out because they're tiny and, they're difficult to keep. And so, every once in a while you'd be having a conversation and then you just have to like kill a fly. And then my advisor, my professor who was, advising my PhD would be like, you may have just killed a Nobel Prize winning fruit fly. So we learned how important that animal is to science.
Thank you for that story in my day. I could go many places with that story, but I'm going to keep it to brass tacks for our Q&A together here. I'm going to take a question that we got online and segue it a little bit. So I was watching the Super Bowl the other day, and the trailer came out for Inside Out 2. And Inside Out was this amazing movie. I loved it anyway. And so we've got this there's characters in the brain that represent emotions in a young girl. I'm curious what you felt about that, and if there are other movies or resources that we can recommend to kids that sort of convey the magic of internal emotions, thoughts, the brain well that you might know about.
One of my favorite things about the movie Inside Out is that it showed how emotions are interactive. Like we can feel multiple emotions at the same time. They can vie for attention. Are we angry or are we sad? How do we actually feel about that? So I really love that movie, and I think that the characters, like what would we be like if we only had one emotion? That'd be like the movie. We would be like the characters in the movie, and so I think that's really wonderful. In terms of other movies to recommend that are really kind of evocative of neuroscience or brains or emotions, I'll have to think about that and get back to you, because for me, any movie that has a person in it is a neuroscience movie.
Yeah.
So it'll be really difficult for me to kind of think of one that focuses on those topics. One of the reasons I love to watch movies is because I am fascinated by human behavior, and that's basically all that movies show me.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. I've got some recommendations for you when
They're
we're
all
done.
brain movies.
Yeah. Time flies and you're having fun, Crystal. We're going to take just a couple more questions before we wrap up. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with brain games and IQ tests and fun things to sort of test my brain from the outside. Is there any merit to these at all? Is there anything that you'd recommend to kids if they wanted to like play and learn more about their brains or how they think that you know of in any way? I know this is a very specific question that's hard to find an answer to, but if you know anything, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, the brain training games are really interesting because you will get better and you will improve at playing that game. But whether or not that makes you better at other things, other behaviors in the world is sort of unknown, right? Like we can learn to be good at pretty much anything that we want to put effort and time into practicing. But brains are actually pretty specific with the way that they handle information, and we just recognize patterns. So I think if you do anything for your brain, it would be to give it new stuff. because every time you add something new to your brain, it integrates into what you already know, and it creates like a more beautiful, complex model of the world, because that's what our brains do. They're trying to make a model of our world so that they can help us navigate it better, right? So I would say the best game you could possibly play with your brain is to learn something new, do something new, challenge yourself, in any of those ways, because that is how new connections are made.
What a beautiful answer. One question I always like to ask to wrap up our broadcast is if there's any last thing you want our kids to leave with. You did a really fantastic talk today, but if there's something that our kids should take away about the neuroscience of love, about neuroscience in general, about being in STEM and having this incredibly diverse career, I know it's a lot, but anything to wrap up our program with today before we say farewell?
I mean, look, I went into STEM because I thought people were confusing and weird, and I couldn't figure out why they did the things that they did or thought the way that they thought. And so I just wanted those questions answered. And so I went from like the history of humans to the psychology of humans to why do we behave the way that we behave? Oh, wait, molecules influence the way that we behave. So that's how I ended up as a neurochemist. So I think the important thing for anyone to know and to take away is, these molecules, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, like you can feel those things not just for other people, but for activities as well. And so if you're reading your biology book and you're getting dopamine and you're feeling happy and you want to turn the page and read, even though that chapter wasn't assigned, pay attention to when you feel those things, because that might lead you to your career. It certainly led me to mine.
Crystal, there's no better wrap up than that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your passion is palpable in all this. We've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. This has been one of my favorite broadcasts ever. Thank you so much for joining for our classes. Check out the rest of the If Then series. So much more to discover. The next 2 days have 7 more broadcasts. If Then She Can has so much more to discover as well. The best resource hub I've literally ever come across. So please do check that out. Crystal, thank you so much again. Have a wonderful rest of your day.